Okay, let's see it again. Let's see if this works now. There's been some problem. I misclicked something apparently. So let me just see. Let me see. Let me see what's happening. Beautiful. Somebody's saying connection is bad. I mean, let's try to work through this somehow. Okay, so I think I messed it up. Good morning, Mr. Again. I think I messed it up with the previous one, so we'll have to adjust it, but I'll do it later. Okay. So, Casper 4.0. We will try to add some descriptions to the call so we could refer back and re-listen whatever needs to be re-listened. So Casper 4.0 has been launched to everybody. We have 33 nodes as of today. Not everybody upgraded. So whenever you have a chance, upgrade if you want to full nodes or validator nodes. Last time we had 55, 57 nodes on the Casper 3.1. So let's see how many people are going to migrate. At some point of time, once the articles are more finished, I would say that that's probably going to happen realistically in September. Good morning, Meta Nomad. Most likely, that's going to happen in September when we are going to restart the reach for validators. What I'm realizing, and I'm going to be publishing another series of articles on that topic, on the topic of clip thinking. That I mentioned for quite some time now. So the opposite of clip thinking is systematic thinking. Watching good morning. The opposite of clip thinking is systematic thinking, and we don't have systematic thinking. We can all say, oh, that's our personal choice to watch social media and scroll through stuff and blah blah blah. But the research, if it's a scientific research, needs to be done with proper biases. And the biases of today exist, such as life is becoming more difficult, uh, food is becoming more shitty, health issues are becoming more extravagant and oftentimes unaffordable. And the quality of specialists, doctors, teachers, engineers, politicians is dropping uh, completely. And with all these biases, right? Given the fact that the life is not becoming easier, and we lose our meanings and missions, of course we scroll through and we develop this clip thinking. And then when we come in to projects like Ghost, we expect similarly to what we expected in other projects. Fast results, very quick effort to fast results. User interface, user experience trumps everything else. If UX is bad, we're not gonna try to change anything. We're not going to try to to actually change how things are, because change how things are is very difficult. So that series of articles will be focusing on how we need to change our clip thinking, and that's the only way how the ghost community will prevail the current governmental structures. That's the only way. The best example for that is uh, government agencies are extremely clunky. Stuff is extremely difficult to use. Look at the best example is probably how to use a tank. You probably have to be trained for months, if not years, to be able to operate a tank. Yet everybody's successfully operating tanks, right? And so they do develop this non-clip thinking to be true professionals in their expertise. Yeah, of course, it could become easier, blah blah blah. Sure, absolutely, we can make it easier, but it's a problem with our brains. We need to start thinking. Um, we need to start develop multi-step thinking, right? We need to start overcoming those mental barriers. And that's how we train ourselves to become better human beings. That's how we train ourselves to become better ghosties. That's the only way. If we are fighting against people super educated, like we can say, okay, like the clowns, the buffoons in the king's palace may be dumb, although That's very debatable. But the kinks are not. The whole thing is the kinks are not. And I'm talking about the kinks, not necessarily the ones that we see on the on the screen, but the ones who really control the situation. These guys are super freaking educated, super knowledgeable, and we need to compete against them. It's not going to be possible to do that with clip thinking. No freaking way. So we either upgrade to PhD levels, or it's going to be absolutely impossible for us to compete, having our kindergarten brains compete against the kings in the palace, those who actually control stuff. So please upgrade to 4.0 Casper 4.0 as soon as possible. Now there's one caveat. The there's a bug in the code base, and the bug is pretty extravagant. We found it yesterday. It has to do with float numbers, meaning too big of numbers. The reason why that happens is because we're using the existing function from Polkadot on estimating staking rewards. And due to multiplication, when we multiply, so essentially we have to multiply then divide as a rule of thumb to make the most precise computation. And because we multiply first and then divide, we run into the floating number. The floating number was only possible because the bridging fees were so large when all of us bridged. So that's why we did not notice that that would be even a possibility. Just to give you an idea of how large the floating number is, we are exceeding 2 to the power of 128 through the multiplication. 2 to the power of 128. That is roughly 3 multiplied by 10 to the power of 38. That's like 38 zeros. And we exceed that number throughout our multiplication. So the team is working on fixing it. And then the question is, what are we going to do? How are we going to redeploy that bug resolution? So option one is to redeploy Casper 4.1. Boom, that's the first option. Second option is to try to proceed with so-called forkless upgrade. Forkless upgrade is one of the biggest reasons why we decided to move with Substrate framework initially back in 2021. Forkless upgrade essentially enables changes to the core, not super critical, but somewhat critical changes, somewhat crucial changes, but not massively critical. Massively critical changes will still require hard forks, but anything below that could potentially be done with the forkless upgrade, and that's a unique opportunity. So therefore, we won't have to redo much on the nodes. The nodes will still be part of the code base, part of the network. We just need to do a little bit of a change. So we'll try to execute that forkless upgrade. Of course, every single node will have to update to that forkless upgrade. Consider that to be a soft fork. And again, that's possible with Substrate, not possible with Bitcoin, not possible with Ethereum, possible with Ghost as well. So that's something for us to do. So the code's still working, meaning the smaller bridging fees will still go through, and all validators will receive those rewards. But if bridging fees increase, then we may the code base will give an error due to the floating error. So that's this. Now on the side of ghostDAO, really quickly, great to see these numbers. Hopefully you guys enjoying these numbers as well. We've seen 8,000 for eCasper and 3,000 still risk-free value. There's no bonding yet, so we have to incorporate certain bonding to increase this risk-free value, increase the price for it, essentially. Market cap is just describing the price of eCasper multiplied by the total supply. Nothing crazy here. But the number that I would like all of us to notice is this ghosted supply. So ghosted supply is the breached supply of ghosts. At this point of time, you can bridge. And I think all of you guys who are on this call have been successfully done with the matter where you purchased eCasper, wrapped it into Casper, and bridged it. So this is the quantity, the market capitalization of the bridged balance, which is quite significant. So of course, when we are to divide this $800,000 by say $8,000, we probably can estimate that we have about 100 Casper bridged, which is quite nice, right? 100 Casper bridged, divide this by say 6.9 Casper required, gives us about 13, 14 nodes, validator nodes who bridged out. So that's interesting, right? Interesting dynamic, interesting kind of situation. And I hope you guys see the positive loop cycle of bridging creates more bridging, right? Because what happens is I want to become a validator. Okay, that's cool. So I have to bridge. But when I bridge, I create a transaction fee, a bridging fee. Thus, when I bridge, I create an APY for the validators. Therefore, more validators want more uh, users, right? Whatever want to become validators in turn because the APY is so great. Currently, I believe the APY was supposed to be 250% annual because of the bridging fee. To give you a comparison, Ethereum's APY is 2.9%. Bitcoin's APY, I'm not going to be able to say, but I think it's what 3.25 Bitcoins compared to the overall $20 million supply. So you pro rata that 3.25, multiply this by 6 blocks per hour, multiply this by 24 hours a day, multiply this by 365 days a year, and then divide this by 20 million to find to calculate whatever, right? Maybe 18 million, 19 million overall supply to calculate the APY, and you get your APY. And it's definitely not going to be 250% annualized APY that we have in Ghost. So bridging creates bridging because if new validators want to be, if new users would like to become validators, they have to do what? Yes, bridge. And when they bridge, they either maintain APY or increase APY, attracting even more bridgers, even more validators. Amazing. And as I mentioned on previous Whales call, some of that stuff is completely luck. Uh, I don't think we're that smart to develop all of these things day one. How they are developing, it was like lots of luck for us to move on with the ghostDAO protocol for price and liquidity discovery. It was pure luck, I believe. And then the idea for bridging and kind of this whole back end of the validated rewards by the bridging fees. I wouldn't say that was necessarily luck, but that was a nice turnout of events. So, in any case, I'm personally nothing short of excited about what we are building. It's just the more I'm diving deeper into this, the more I'm like, no freaking way we could have thought about that. No freaking way, um, you know, that architecture, you know, like was so eloquent and beautiful, and it is extremely elegant. It's just insane. So let's now, if you guys have any questions, please shoot. But I would like to focus more on the fundamental matters of what we have. So I thought, so I developed a new series. Two of those articles are already public. Another three I'm going to be sharing today. And I thought initially I will only have 4 or 5 articles, but it seems like I'm going to proceed with about 11 articles in that series. The series is going to be called Ghost Monetary Paradigm. And that is, I believe, the most important series. And Mr. IDK specifically, if anything needs to be worked on, like let's assume that you kind of starting to, you know, not have enough and let's say this: you have a little bit of free time, and you're thinking which series shall be turned into videos, and not necessarily article per article, but just the overall kind of like the storyline. I believe that series shall be the one. I think that's the most important series because when we wrote DEX and liquidity providers, those series are more for kind of basic, profound, foundational, but still understanding of DEXs, how the DEXs work with formulas and math. When we are going to be describing ghostDAO, yes, that's going to be totally instrumental for monetary supply. Don't get me wrong. That's going to be like instrument, like you have to know how ghostDAO works to set the monetary policy, right? But I think the higher level description of how we change the world, of how um, Ghost is introducing something truly novel. The series will explain how Ghost is better than Ethereum. The series will explain how Ghost is better than Bitcoin. Again, as I mentioned multiple times already, I did not have an idea before. So before I thought that we just do bridging. So we have the meta blockchain, meta layer connecting existing EVM and non-EVM blockchains, right? So Ethereum, Bitcoin, Monero, etc. But now I'm realizing that we are absolutely doing the bridging, but bridging is more like a tool. But the final destination for us is to become a new type of money. This type of money is very different from the existing monies. So Ghost is actually revolutionizing money. And how that's possible, the only reason why that's possible is due to the fact that the money is digital, the money is purely Web3 based. Um, and of course, bridging is a component of it. So I would say bridging is like a tool enabling the money. However, it doesn't have to be just bridging. It could be anything else. It could be on-chain insurance. It could be the DEX. It could be lending borrowing protocols. So why Uniswap and the likes of Ali Compound did not turn their on-chain fees into money? They didn't, but we will. And that money, the reason the way how that money is different is it has finite supply or diminishing supply. It is increasing. It's not deflationary. It's inflationary, but at decreasing rates. So it's disinflationary. And uh, the money is a great store of value because if you allocate, of course, there's a disclaimer, but if you allocate your savings funds, etc., do not sell your car, do not sell your house. But if anybody, not you, if anybody allocates money, their savings into Ghost, they will not only be able to preserve the value, but they will be able to maximize their value, where every single multiplied piece preserves value in turn. So, as one of the whales succinctly put it out, is it's gold that produces babies. So, gold meaning gold it doesn't has inelastic supply, so meaning it has finite supply and preserves purchasing power because it's a reserve currency. Then when you put it, you come in a year later and you find your piece of gold plus its babies as well, also piece of gold, and they also preserve their value in turn. And that could have an insane impact on how we view money, right? So, and that's why I'm excited. So let's go through those first. So 2 articles are published, 3 articles are scheduled, and another 6 articles will be like are in the works right now. So they will be coming out. So I think they'll all come out by probably mid-September. 2 articles per week. So we just have that many articles. So probably end of September, maybe mid-September, maybe beginning of September. So first things first, let's go through. I covered some of this stuff already, so I'll skim through some of this stuff, and then I'll be paying more attention to something else. So first of all, we have the so-called inflationary assets, and crypto players led us to believe that there's deflationary assets and inflationary assets, and I mean, sure, that's true. I mean, when Bitcoin was originated, they tried to bring all these all type of new definitions like the hodl and to the moon and stuff like that. And they said, oh, we're also going to be revolutionizing economics. So we are because Bitcoin is a deflationary asset. That's at least what I've heard, like a lot, to the point where I used it myself, the term myself, wrongfully. So it's not. I was wrong. It was not the correct usage of the term. So deflationary again means that the supply literally decreases. It literally goes down, which we cannot say about Bitcoin. So with Bitcoin, we have a relative deflationary asset, maybe, but it's a relative deflationary. What does it mean relative? Relative means that there's a finite quantity of Bitcoins. It does increase. The supply of Bitcoins increase every single day, right? Through the block rewards. At this point in time, it's 3.25 Bitcoins per block per 10 minutes, roughly. So yes, of course, the schedule is diminishing. So every single 4 years we'll have fewer and fewer Bitcoins issued. However, they're still going to be issued. Therefore, Bitcoin is still inflationary. It's not deflationary. But the reason why it's potentially relatively deflationary is because the population increases. So therefore, since the quantity of the number of people increases every single year, and the growth rate of population is faster than the growing rate of Bitcoins, then relatively Bitcoin is deflationary. But that's bullshit. Because what if population tomorrow, God forbid, starts diminishing? So we cannot be attaching like we can then say that Bitcoin is relatively deflationary, like add that adjective relative, but we shall be looking at the fundamental properties of a given asset. That's very important. So let's kind of dive into the fundamentals of the money of we have Bitcoins, Ethereum, potential cryptocurrencies, right? We have obviously dollar and treasuries and gold. So Deflationary is just a wrong definition. Inflationary may potentially be a right definition of an asset, and most assets are inflationary because their supply does expand, right? So essentially, if your supply is expanding, you are inflationary, right? It's very, very simple. And so how would that look like, right? So inflationary would, asset would look like this. Of course, contingent upon the rate of growth is the same, right? And then deflationary assets would look, and I'll show you how that would look like. So here, for example, from money perspective, we have USD, right? The US dollar. Just like any fiat, it is inflationary in nature. Why? Because the quantity of dollars increases every single year. So currently, if we measure the quantity of all dollars by M2, and M2 is this white line right there. So M2 includes M1 and M2. The description of M1, M2 is right there. So it's essentially liquid assets. So it's your deposits, your actual cash in circulation, certain super liquid savings, some checking accounts, small denomination time deposits, right? So stuff that we can that is very liquid, meaning you can get it super like fast. Um, so that stuff M2 grows by 6.8% annually. And that's what the Austrians are saying. The Austrians are saying, hey, listen, like M2, like it grows 6.8% a year. So the inflation therefore is 6.8% a year. It's not 2% a year. Now, we have some whales. One of them is Starman in particular, and he correctly mentioned, hey, take a second, wait a second. Like 6.8% a year, that's just the money supply. That's cool. But the money supply does not just exist in vacuum. The money supply exists in relativity to the population. Population increases, but not just the population. It's more like to production, right? So more population produce more because the growing population consumes more, right? Whether it's businesses or actual physical retail consumers. So we need to potentially adjust that 6.8% of M2 growth by the productivity, and that's a pretty common feedback from economists specifically. I mean, I'm not going to mark Starman as Keynesian by no means, absolutely not. But Keynesians in particular, like push for that for that point that so we have the GDP, right? So GDP right here is yellow, and then we have the CPI, the actual inflation. So and that's CPI after we adjusted for the output growth. So essentially, when we take the production, the output, which is GDP growth, which is tiny yellow thing right there, and then we take on top of it the CPI, which represents the lion's share of the appreciation, we roughly get the M2. So CPI, that's inflation, right? So that's official inflation. So, that's the argument of the central bank. They say, hey, listen, we don't bullshit you. The inflation is real. It's not 6.8%. If there's no hidden inflation, screw you guys. Everything is in norm because when we take output plus the inflation on the output, we literally match in the M2 inflation. So chill the hell out. You don't know what you're talking about. We are the professionals with the economists and you don't know shit. So that's what they say. But even in that argument, the CPI still increases. Like it's everybody kind of confirm whether it's Austrians who say the money is inflated by roughly 7% per year, or the more Keynesian or more kind of I'm not even sure how to say it, like maybe modern and also common sense. Like I would say some common sense people too. They still all agree that CPI at least is real, and the CPI here is about 2 to 3% per year. Sometimes it's higher. So no matter what, the USD is inflationary. Scorpion says, ask a question. Do I understand correctly? Validators make percentage of bridging fees as well as gas from Casper, and other transactions. However, bridging fees are more lucrative for validators. That's a great question. Let me get back to this at the end of the of the call. It will dilute our focus a little bit from our discussion right now. All right, so that is inflationary. Now, what is deflationary? So deflationary again is when supply actually decreases over time. Specifically, supply of an asset specifically decreases over time. So there are not that many deflationary assets, and in fact, the trajectory looks something like this. So it's hard to say what assets are actually deflationary, but potentially some antiques, right? So you have some, super old Roman coins, and they get bad over time, or maybe wine, right? So wine from, I don't know, 1800s, and then some wine goes bad. Potentially, some wine people drink, So that specific, wine crop 1800s, maybe that is actually a deflationary asset. Same thing maybe applies to some antique paintings, right? By I don't know Picasso, like maybe he painted whatever 100 paintings, and then 10 of them, or like one painting per year gets lost or something gets stolen, right? I mean, that's a deflationary asset. There are not that many deflationary assets in the world, and that's why the crypto community, especially Bitcoiners, said, hey, we are deflationary, but Bitcoin is not deflationary, right? So Bitcoin is actually inflationary, and here's the trajectory of Bitcoin. So it increases, and then by the time whenever the supply ends in roughly 2140, that's where the supply of bitcoins will become finite. It will still not be deflationary. It will never be deflationary. As Mitsari K properly mentioned, yes, maybe when we lose some bitcoins, yes, that becomes deflationary, but that's not fundamental. Now, Ethereum also not deflationary, so here we had some stagnation here because they started burning fees. Okay, and the only one that is deflationary is XRP. So we went over this before, right? So XRP is actually deflationary. We don't have any charts of XRPY because when you try to search for XRP supply over time, nobody's publishing any statistic for a top 3 crypto projects in the world, which is fucking shame. So therefore, we don't have this data. We just have this, little bit of pieces here. Okay. Now the question is, what about gold? Is gold deflationary, inflationary? Well, gold is also inflationary because the supply of gold increases. This is the annual production, cumulative. No, that's just per year production since 1900s, and production every single year has actually been increasing. So gold is also inflationary. So essentially, everything is inflationary. So the only crypto at this moment from the major cryptos that is potentially deflationary is XRP, but the deflationary aspect of XRP is pretty low. So as I mentioned, over the course of the last 10 years, 0.01% of total supply has been burned of XRP. So to burn 1%, it will take just 900 years. I mean, we can all wait for that, right? We can only live through those 900 years to just burn 1% of supply of XRP. So technically, fundamental is deflationary, but practically, whatever. All right, so that's this. So if those cryptos are not deflationary, inflationary, what are they? And they are, in reality, elastic or inelastic. Specifically, we have elasticity of supply, we have elasticity of demand. So specifically, we're talking about elasticity of supply. So, and that's important, right? So we need to just define these cryptos correctly, and therefore also then draw a proper parallel between Ghost and those other cryptos. So what is elasticity? Elasticity of supply is the response to the quantity produced based on the supply, based on the price. So I'm creating a burger and I can sell it for $1, but I can, for some reason, raise that price to $5. So I'll start producing a lot of burgers right away. So my supply will be very elastic. Conversely, Bitcoin, like one of the better examples of inelastic, gold as well, is no matter how much you push the price of Bitcoin, you cannot physically produce more Bitcoins. Like in case of Bitcoin, that's the limitations are in the code base. In case of gold, for example, the limitations is the finite supply available, known to the humanity today, and also difficulty in extraction. So, but we're going to cover this in slightly more detail. So this third article here will be published, I'm not sure when. It just gives us a quick brush on microeconomics, which if you guys took microecon in college, you should have learned it. Well, I did, and of course we spent, I don't know, maybe half an hour on this topic, maybe 10 minutes, and we just skipped it because it's not important. In fact, that's one of the most important aspects that I understand now of money specifically. So you want money to be inelastic or perfectly inelastic. So visually, how that will be looking like is elastic is a horizontal curve. Perfectly elastic is a horizontal curve. So it has some pros and cons. If the price slightly increases, then the quantity produced will be nothing, right? And there are very, very few perfectly elastic supply assets, let alone monies, right? Currencies. But This supply is what we have. So elastic supply where the curve is slightly flatter. So tiny changes in price lead to larger changes in quantity supplied. Right? That's very important. That's how we lose purchasing power. That's why we say dollar loses purchasing power. Why? Because the price of a dollar increases a little bit, like how many things you can buy with it, but they print so many of these dollars that the purchasing power per every single dollar actually drops. Right? That's why we say like, oh, like kind of dollar is a shitcoin. And dollar is one of the best fiat currencies out there. So what can you say about Argentina and peso? What can you say about Turkish lira or Sudanese, whatever they have? Or Zimbabwe dollar, right? Like those are complete shit fucking coins. Right? Not even a question about it, because they can print so much in quantity while the purchasing power therefore is increasing a little bit or maybe even decreasing. Then inelastic supply, so that's slightly steep. Well, not slightly. It's a steeper curve, right? So it's steep, not flat. It's a steeper curve, and then we have perfectly inelastic, which uh, again, that's probably antiques, right? So perfectly inelastic is when your supply is literally like quantity is literally finite. It's like limited. It cannot increase. So again, the best example is probably antique paintings and wine and stuff like that. Cars, right? Watches, right? Stuff like that. You cannot produce more of it anymore, no matter what the price is. Price is going up or down. The quantity is the same. So finite supply. So from those lenses, let's now look into the rest of the monies, right? And then let's look also into Ghost. And we're going to wrap up today with that. And read through these articles whenever they're published. This is again the most important series. If you want to understand Ghost, I would say that is the most important part. Okay, like all of like the whole series called Ghost Monetary Paradigm. So let's look through the monies, right? So elasticity of monies, part 4 of the series, where we're gonna go through elasticity of. Let's start with dollars, right? So dollars, that's obviously again that's one of the better fiat currencies out there. Again, the shittier ones. What is better than Tether? I want to say Tether because it's USDT, another shitcoin, right? What's better than dollar is maybe Swiss franc because it's allegedly backed by gold. 25% of Swiss franc is backed by gold. Again, allegedly, we don't know. Hopefully, right? But there are no proof of reserves and any of that stuff that we can verifiably check outside of public reports, because those can be faked. So what can we say about the dollar? So the dollar here, so this is a scatter plot of USD index. USD index is essentially the price of dollar compared to other currencies, and it has been increasing. So it increased by from 100 up to 125 roughly. So it did appreciate compared to other relative to other currencies. So it's good. Yeah, well, yeah, it's good. If other currencies though are complete shit, then this is a better type of shit, right? Like if all the other currencies are let's say horse shit, USD is dog shit. Okay, good. They're still shit, right? I'm sorry for those. Kind of that's how we should be looking at this, right? But still, USD is one of the better currencies because on average it did actually appreciate compared to others by 25% over the course of 20 years since 2006. Now, what about the M2 supply though? How much did it increase by? Because if it increased by less than 25%, it's okay. But if it increased by more than 25%, now that's elastic. Now that's bad. So, of course, when we look at the pro rata, right? So pro rata means, standardized data. This is 250%, this is 250%. We're looking at this 45-degree line, which is invisible, right? But the 45-degree line, you kind of okay, right? And look at how flat this thing is. Like, I wouldn't say it's perfectly flat. It's not completely horizontal, of course, but it's a very, very tiny slope. It's a very, very flat curve. So USD is elastic, and that's why it's bad. Right? That's why it's a bad money. Why? You can hold. Well, you can hold it. I mean, of course you can, but you shouldn't. And we all do. Um, and they would say to us, well, nobody put a gun to your head to hold dollars. Why the hell do you hold dollars? Well, because you fuckers prevent us from holding anything else. Because if I hold, let's assume bitcoins, I have to report it to you. So I have to give you my social security, my address, and also how much bitcoins I hold, and also and next time I'll probably also have to be taking a fucking picture of the USB drive where I hold bitcoins and also send that to you, IRS, right? Like, you fuckers force me to hold dollars. Like I don't, like gold, like in the US in particular, gold was illegal to be held, right? Until 1965, I think everybody had to forcefully give gold back to the government. So what the hell was that? Right? Like I cannot, like you forcing me to hold your shitcoin. You literally forcing me to. Same thing with in other countries, it's even worse. Again, U.S. is one of the better countries from freedom perspective, and all the other countries are even worse for the most part, except for very few. Again, like maybe Switzerland, Singapore, and I don't know, Hong Kong, maybe Japan. Maybe Europe, some countries within Europe. But here, this is a totally like elastic supply, and that's why it's bad money. That's why we say it's bad money, right? Of course, Keynesians say it's great money. How about they fucking hold them then? How come those Keynesians? But how come those Keynesians never fucking hold out? That's the question. How come they always hold stocks? Being bribed with confidential information inside of trading, right? How come they don't hold this amazing currency that they minting and in favor of? Okay, now the substitute of cash of fiat is treasuries, right? So treasuries can be potentially better, well, allegedly, right? So how treasuries are being issued, how money is being printed. So uh, the Congress says, hey, listen, we need to print more money. Well, they cannot just print more money, right? It cannot just like, when they say money printed goes brr, it does not mean that, actually it happens like that, right? What happens is you issue bonds. So money is created through debt. So the debt is being issued through so-called treasury auctions. And then people across the world, including the central bank, including the Fed, buying those treasuries. It's like, so what happens is Fed issues treasuries and then they also buy the treasuries. Like, that's what they do. That's what they fucking do. Just so you know. Um, it's insane. If you understood how banking works, like this one whale keeps bringing this amazing quote, like if people understood how banking works, the revolution would happen tomorrow, or the revolution would happen before lunch, whatever. Like one of those. Like it's crazy how corrupt this fucking system is. So but allegedly they're better. Why? Because you cannot just print treasuries uncontrollably. Of course you can, because you have to arrange the so-called auctions, right? So this is the auction scenario. So when you start an auction for treasuries, let's assume you open the offering for T-bills in a quantity of $100 billion, right? In that case, not necessarily $100 billion will be purchased. Maybe $90 billion will be purchased. So the net issuance, that is how many bonds, bills, notes have actually been purchased. So the actual auction quantities are a multiple of that, maybe 10x. So about maybe 10% is net issuance, because some treasuries also expire, some treasuries never get bought, but the net issuance is how many treasuries actually got purchased. So how much money actually got printed. Like that's the net issuance. So T-bills are those within a year, treasuries within a year. T-notes, I believe that's 10 years, and then T-bonds, that's longer term. Again, I believe that's actually T-notes maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever, and then 10 years, and then T-bonds, I think that's like 30 years, 20 years, whatever. In any case, that's all debt, right? So short-term and long-term debt. And as you can see, those beautiful yellow, blue, and white boxes here, you can see that the treasury yield has been whatever, oscillating between 0.5% to 4.5%. Thus, the price of bonds have been oscillating respectively around those numbers somewhere, while the issuance is pretty high. Another interesting component is you cannot find this data. It's not freely available. You would have assumed that it is, right? Because it's U.S. Treasuries. Well, this SIFMA, SIFMA, I'm not sure how that's abbreviated. So they have data since 2014, only for the last 10 years. And the way to request that data is you have to give your first name, last name, your email, your occupation. Of course, you can present fake data, which kind of how this data was derived. But also, if you do not have an American access, like American US VPN, you're not going to be able to download the data. So how available, how public the data is. They say public data is public. Well, okay, where is it? Because I don't fucking see it. It's not public. Only 10 years of this stuff is available. It's crazy. It's pretty detailed, but it's only 10 years. It's incredible. The level of corruption is incredible. Of course, is this data audited? Who knows? Who knows? Is it worse than this? Who knows? So now, if we are to standardize this data as well, as you can see, the yields didn't really grow much, as meaning the price of bonds, while the supply of bonds 2,500%, right? Like that's the standardization. That's how much, meaning roughly 25x, the debt increased. The net issuance of the debt increased cumulatively since 2014. 25x. Let that sink in. And the curve, like if you mentally draw the line through these points, you will get a pretty damn horizontal line. So it's not perfectly elastic, but it's damn near, right? It's like super close to it. So it's so treasuries as a substitute of cash is also elastic. It's also bad money. Okay. Let's now proceed with elastic supply, inelastic supply of gold. So mentioned this on Whale's call as well. So in case of gold, you would assume, well, it's not deflationary, unfortunately, but you would assume it's probably inelastic because Austrians keep saying that gold is good money, and then we look at the chart. And the chart here looks flat sloped, but then here all of a sudden it's roughly like kind of more steeper, but it's only since 2000 or so, right? And this data is since 1900s. Again, that's all the data I was able to find. Talking about public data, gold is available since 1900s, and treasuries are available since 2014. You guys make your decisions, right? Like about stuff, and that's United States of America. If you go to look into debt offerings from emerging countries such as Brazil, such as I don't know, Venezuela, Turkey, I don't know, UAE, good luck to you. Like US at least publishes a lot of its data. just saying, guys. Um, this data is from the World Gold Council. So now, what happens if we standardize this data? And that what puzzled me. And this article took actually a long time to write. It really puzzled me because when the standardized data has been drawn, it's 50,000% increase in production. So it's 500x increase in production cumulatively. The curve is damn flat. So what the hell is happening? How? Like, so gold is also bad money? And it really puzzled me. The thing about gold and the thing about economists. So, like, if you guys are, I don't know, mathematicians, 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. Yeah. If you guys are physicists, well, gravity exists. Okay, so there's a theory of gravity. Like you can fall, don't do it, but you can jump off the bridge and you'll experience it. Don't do it, kids. But when it comes down to the science of economics, apparently it's not a science anymore. Despite the Nobel Prize awarded for the economists specifically, the reason why that's apparently not a science is because every single person has different definition of gold's elasticity. You're not going to be able to find a unanimous decision on whether gold is elastic or not. It's fucking crazy. Like, it's insane. And it's probably due to the fact that, like, let's not make it, definitive, because if gold is in fact good money, it makes sense, right? Like, why would we tell that it's good money if we are, the government of the United States? Why would, or any other government, why would we say that gold is good money? Like, no, we want people to buy our shitcoins. So let's like have really, really, dubious definitions of gold. And I got puzzled as well because you look at this flat nature. I'm like, okay, so is it actually elastic? Is it also bad money? And then I started diving into the facts. So the facts are such that, so I think I erased it, and I probably need to add it back. So the total supply of gold extracted to the day can be formed into a cube 22 meters each side. Feet-wise, that is roughly 70 feet each side. That's it. That's a cube. So each edge of a cube is 70 feet, 22 meters. That's all gold extracted to date ever in history. Okay, that's cool. That's cool information. How come it's still elastic? Thing is this. To date, there have been 220, 216, numbers are different, but roughly 200,000 plus metric tons of gold extracted to date. 2/3 of that extracted since 1950s. There are some charts that show that 80% of all gold that we have today is extracted since the beginning of the 20th century, so since 1900s. And that's exactly what the data that this data is showing. This data is starting 1900s. So humans said, hey, you know what? There's a gold rush. Like, oh, we have technology, we have gold, let's extract this all. So we extracted almost all of it in the 20th century. How much gold is left though? Like, can we extract indefinitely? Because the CFA Institute, fucking shame, say that gold is perfectly elastic. Motherfuckers. They say that the gold is perfectly elastic because it just responds to prices. Right? So the gold miners only respond to prices, therefore the production of gold is perfectly elastic. CFA is essentially the leading institute to produce the financiers, who then proceed to work at the large investment banks, hedge funds, and the government, the Federal Reserve. Shame on them, these motherfuckers. Because they conveniently forget to say that there's only 54,000 tons remaining. So again, just to put this in perspective, to date, 200,000 tons have been extracted to date, assuming that 80% of that extracted in the 19th century, or 20th century. There's another 25% remaining that is easily accessible that we know how to extract. That's it. That's it. Can there be more gold reserves? Yes. In Uganda, they found another like massive, kind of reservation of gold, but it's extremely difficult to extract. There are huge lands with gold in Alaska, in Canada. Good luck extracting it. Good luck extracting it. It's in the land. It's extremely freaking costly to extract it. And the price will skyrocket if that gold is to be extracted today. So gold, so that's why it's important to look between fundamental nature and actual. Fundamentally, actual physical nature, physically today, gold seems to be elastic based on this curve. But fundamentally, it's inelastic as hell. So it's very good money, actually. So in fact, this analysis tells me that the gold will probably skyrocket, completely skyrocket, because there's not much reserves anymore. Not a financial advice. Finally, so Bitcoin. So, well, not finally, actually, Bitcoin. Then we also have Ethereum. So Bitcoin supply. So that's the Bitcoin supply versus price since 2010. And no matter how small of a time horizon I took, all time 10 years, all time means like 15 years, right? 10 years, 5 years, 3 years. The curve is just like you just cannot make it not vertical. It's crazy. You cannot make it not vertical. It looks like this. It's crazy. And that's why, like, the more I look at that, I'm like, oh shit. This is cool. That's why Bitcoin is money. That's why Bitcoin is money. It's inelastic supply. Of course, depends upon demand. Absolutely. 100%. Is there demand? The other question is, are there any assets that are inelastic and that there are not that many assets? So the perfectly inelastic asset they say is land, because it's finite in nature, but there's so much land and the demand for it, and it's actually very cheap. Yeah, it does increase, especially farming land. I think produces 20% per annum as far as rewards and stuff, but there's a lot of land. But the finite asset with inelastic supply that is, like not as in abundance as land is Bitcoin is number one, gold number two. That's why it's money. And of course, from that perspective, when you look at it like this, it makes sense why everybody will be rushing to it. Why? Because there are no other assets like that. Like the asset creates itself. The question is, what if there's no demand for Bitcoin? Yes, but then the demand will be for something else. For what? What are some better assets that are also finite, that are also inelastic in nature? Not land, gold, and Bitcoin. Okay, so you can diversify between those three. You have it right there. So that's interesting. That's a very interesting perspective. If you look at Bitcoin elasticity, if you look at USD elasticity, you're not going to find that many articles. You're not going to find that many articles on elastic. Again, in college, maybe half an hour spent on this topic, and we moved on. Also, very telling that they don't want us to know anything of value. And then, so obviously Bitcoin is inelastic. And then the final thing is Ethereum. So Ethereum, so that's the chart of supply versus price. And no matter how low the horizon I placed as well, it was also a vertical line. Then the question is Ethereum then also inelastic? And we run into the same argument as we did with gold. We need to look at fundamental value of Ethereum. So practically it looks like, right? It looks like it's inelastic. It looks like it's money. But the only reason why the supply, right? So the only reason why the supply is shown in the previous article, where is it here? Was it here? The only reason why the supply here was stagnant is because they started burning fees. But when they started burning fees, what happened is users use Ethereum, they pay the gas fee to the validators. Let's assume they pay 8% of gas fees to the validators, of which, and let's assume only 3% goes to the validators, so that 5% gets burned. So far the network is people use actually the network, right? So it has massive utility. So let's assume it produces 8% in fees. So a portion of those fees could be burnt, and then only a fraction of the actual fees will go to the miners. Here's a problem with that approach. So they were able to do that, to pull this off since 2022, and it's not that's a programmatic decision. But at any point of time tomorrow, they can do another hard fork and change that decision, right? So that decision could be vetoed and got out. So here, based on this formula, this is the Ethereum staking rewards. So when they started introducing it in 2020, for a quick second, a couple of months, it was almost 18% per annum for the validators. It was not like annualized, right? So they got 1.5% per month. Then it started dropping, and it dropped, and now it's below 4%. And the question here is this: at what point will the miners of Ethereum say enough is enough? 3% is fucking bullshit. Pay me more. Because I have to lock in my Ethereum, 32 ETH, which at this point of time is like 100 grand. I have to maintain it. I have to risk being hacked, because there is a risk being hacked when you mine over Ethereum, because you are still portraying your keys. So, and all of that for 3% just doesn't make any sense. And as you can see, the trajectory is not positive. The trajectory of rewards to validators is decreasing. No, of course it is decreasing. Why is it decreasing? The quantity of burnt is proportional to gas fees paid, but the gas fees paid is just dropping because the network is getting less, like fewer and fewer utility. Unfortunately. And because of that, the rewards are decreasing. So it's a matter of time when validators will start leaving the network, if there are good alternatives. And if they start leaving the network, Ethereum will have no option but to start increasing the APY, the staking rewards. Thus, they will have to stop the burnage of the fees. Thus, the supply will start increasing. Thus, the supply become inflationary. Thus, it will start becoming finite. Thus, it will stop physically, visually looking like inelastic. So while it looks like inelastic, in reality, it is elastic supply. Okay? But they were able to synthetically represent it. So that is the case with Ethereum. Okay? So far, like if you look at the table of long-term, short-term elasticity, the good money is, of course, gold, inelastic and elastic, both short-term and long-term. Bitcoin is good money as well because it's inelastic short-term and perfectly inelastic long-term after 2140. And then everything else is bad money. And I believe I have a matrix right here where we have these quadrants, 2x2 matrix. Long-term inelastic, short-term inelastic, that's gold and bitcoins. Here we have government treasuries. Short-term, it's inelastic. Why? Because it can only be issued through auctions. Auctions need to be voted in by the Congress. So short-term, it's inelastic, but long-term, they expand as hell. So short-term, they just emulate the nature of the gold, of the dollar, and also Tether. Tether is both short-term and long-term elastic. With all our love to Ethereum, from mining perspective, they're not really doing anything. Cool. So I thought I would have time to finish this Elasticity of eGhost. The article was published earlier today. scheduled rather earlier today. It's still private. Look at this. Look at how much stuff is here. Look at how much stuff is here. It's crazy. Well, just to give you, so we'll probably cover it next time, but just to give you a little bit of uh, of a sneak peek. So the elasticity of e-ghost, we're talking about e-ghost, not ghost. E-ghost, even e-ghost. Short term, it's elastic, and I prove this in this article. Short term, it's elastic. Long term, it's inelastic. If we are looking at e-ghost on one single chain, if you're gonna go and look at multi-chain situation similar depending on how we launch on EVM1, EVM2, EVM3, and all the other EVMs respectively. In the short term, it will have this elastic tendencies, but then long term, it's inelastic. So if you look at this matrix, we are literally egos literally filling this quadrant right there. That's the innovation by itself. Name me another money that is short-term elastic, long-term inelastic. What the hell does it mean? It means that in the short term, yeah, we can mint lots of egos. In the short term, in the long term though, the supply becomes finite. If there's enough demand for it, what happens to price? You tell me, not a financial advice. So while during the elastic phase makes sense to accumulate, why? Because long term it's inelastic. Long term it's finite supply. It's either finite or the price point increases faster than supply increases. Not a financial advice. I'm not going to give any specific conclusions. You make these conclusions yourselves. We have to be understanding that egos is a utility token, not a security token. But from purely economics perspective, it is long term inelastic. When it comes down to ghosts, which is going to be the next one that I'm working on now, you guys will just be ecstatic, just like me. Just like me. So with egos, we're already innovating money. We're already feeling this quadrant. With ghost, long and behold, we're going to be here. And the question will be, okay, but gold is Bitcoin and Bitcoin are already here. Ghost is also already here. How is Ghost better than them? Also in future articles. 11 articles total, I think we will have. Scorpion, did not have a chance to respond to your question. Let's please respond to this question on Whales Wednesdays. On Wednesday, please. Everybody else, thank you so much. Mr. ADK, I hope you'll find your inspiration in this series. I really hope so. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.